The first time I saw him, I didn't. Not really. I noticed the shift in the restaurant's atmosphere instead, like someone had turned down the volume dial on the world. The chatter at nearby tables softened. The clinking of silverware grew hesitant. Even the kitchen staff, visible through the serving window, slowed their frantic movements to a cautious choreography. "Table 7, Monica hissed, appearing at my elbow and pressing a leather-bound menu into my damp palm. "Corner booth." I followed her gaze across La Stella's dining room, past the glittering chandeliers that hung too low and the tables draped in crisp white cloths. The corner booth, the best seat in the house, always reserved but rarely occupied, was no longer empty. "That's Dante Russo," she whispered, tugging at the wrinkled hem of her server's uniform. "Don't stare, and for God's sake, don't mess up." My throat constricted. Everyone in East Harbor knew the name Dante Russo, even sheltered girls like me who'd spent the last 4 years caring for a dying father instead of paying attention to city politics, or what lurked beneath them. Whispered conversations in the break room had taught me enough. Dante Russo owned half the waterfront. People who crossed him disappeared. And now he sat in my section, a dark silhouette against cream-colored upholstery. "Why me?" I asked, smoothing my hands over my black apron. "Can't you take him?" Monica snorted. "Manager's orders. Said you're the least likely to make small talk." She gave me a once-over, a flicker of sympathy crossing her features. "Just be invisible, Ellie. The way you usually are. I could do invisible. I'd perfected it over years of tiptoeing around my father's sick room, learning to exist without making a sound. Invisibility had become my armor in a world that moved too fast and demanded too much." With a deep breath, I straightened my spine and approached table 7. 3 men occupied the curved booth. 2 sat on the outside edges, large men with impassive faces and bulky suit jackets that didn't quite hide the unnatural weight beneath their arms. Guards, sentries. Their eyes tracked my approach without emotion, but it was the man in the center who commanded the space. He wasn't looking at me yet, his attention focused on something on the table. A phone, maybe, though I couldn't see past his broad shoulders. Dark hair, neatly trimmed at the sides, but longer on top, fell across his forehead as he bent over whatever held his interest. He wore no tie with his charcoal suit, and the top buttons of his white shirt were undone, revealing a sliver of tanned skin. I stopped at a respectful distance, careful not to cast a shadow over the table. "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to La Stella." The guards didn't acknowledge me, but the man in the center looked up, and the air vanished from my lungs. Dante Russo couldn't have been more than 35, with features that belonged on a Renaissance painting. High cheekbones, a strong jaw darkened by 5 o'clock shadow, and lips that curved slightly at one corner, as if he found the world perpetually amusing. But it was his eyes that trapped me. Dark, almost black in the restaurant's dim lighting, intense with an intelligence that seemed to strip away pretense. Those eyes widened fractionally as they met mine, and something flashed in their depths. Surprise? Recognition? I couldn't tell, but it sent a shiver racing down my spine. "Water for the table," he said, his voice low and smooth, with the barest hint of an Italian accent. Not a question. Never a question from men like him. I nodded, acutely aware of my shabby uniform, the cheap synthetic fabric that never quite looked pressed despite my efforts. Next to his obvious wealth, the gold watch that glinted at his wrist probably cost more than a year of my rent. I felt like a shadow, insubstantial and gray. "Would you like to hear our specials?" I managed, proud that my voice remained steady. "No." He hadn't looked away from my face. "Bring a bottle of the 1989 Brunello di Montalcino. And whatever appetizers the chef recommends." I should have written it down, but my hands refused to move. I stood frozen under his scrutiny, feeling as though he was cataloging every detail. The dark circles under my eyes from too many double shifts, the wisps of blonde hair escaping my hastily secured bun, the small scar above my right eyebrow from a childhood fall. "Is that a problem?" he asked when I remained silent too long. "No, sir." I finally broke eye contact, looking down at my notepad. 1989, Brunello di Montalcino and Chef's Choice appetizers. I'll bring those right away. As I turned to leave, his voice stopped me. "Your name?" My pulse jumped. "Eleanor, sir. Everyone calls me Ellie." "Ellie," he repeated, as if tasting the word. "Not tonight. Tonight? You're Eleanor." Heat crawled up my neck and into my cheeks. I nodded once and hurried away, feeling his gaze burning into my back. In the kitchen, I leaned against the cool tile wall, trying to collect myself. This was ridiculous. He was just a customer, an important, dangerous customer, but still just a man wanting dinner. I'd serve him efficiently and invisibly, as Monica had instructed, and then he would leave, and my life would continue in its narrow, careful path. But when I returned with the wine, something had shifted. The bodyguards had moved to a separate table nearby, leaving Dante alone in the booth. As I set down the bottle, I noticed a small velvet box open on the table beside his hand. Inside gleamed a diamond ring, the stone so large it seemed obscene. "Do you think she'll like it?" he asked, catching me staring. I almost dropped the corkscrew. "I'm sure any woman would, sir." His mouth curved into that half-smile again. "That's not what I asked, Eleanor." I glanced at the ring again, then at his expectant face. Something told me he valued honesty, so I gave it to him. "It's beautiful, but it's also intimidating. Like wearing a building on your finger." I immediately regretted my words, but to my surprise he laughed, a rich, genuine sound that transformed his severe features. Several heads turned in our direction, shocked by the sound. "Intimidating," he repeated, closing the box with a snap and slipping it into his pocket. "Perhaps that's appropriate." As I poured his wine with hands that weren't quite steady, he watched me with that same unsettling intensity. "You're new here." 6 months, I corrected softly. "And before that?" I shouldn't answer. Personal questions from customers, especially customers like him, were dangerous territory, but something in his tone made it impossible to deflect. "I took care of my father. He was sick for a long time." I set the bottle down. "He died in January." Dante nodded, as if confirming something he already knew. "And now you're alone." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Yes." "That's a dangerous state for a woman in this city." Before I could respond, the kitchen doors swung open, and Marco, one of the other servers, emerged with a tray of appetizers. He faltered when he saw me standing at Dante's table, confusion crossing his features. He'd been scheduled for the night off. What was he doing here? "I've got this," he said, moving toward us with an eager smile. Something about his appearance set off alarm bells in my mind. Marco never smiled like that, all teeth and no warmth. And he'd changed his usual cologne for something stronger, more chemical. His movements seemed too precise, his eyes too focused on Dante rather than the tray he carried. In that moment, everything slowed down. I saw Marco's hand dip into his jacket pocket. I saw the slight bulge there, unnatural and angular. I saw his eyes, cold and determined in a way I'd never noticed before. Without thinking, I leaned close to Dante, my lips nearly brushing his ear. "Keep still," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the restaurant's ambient noise. My hand found his under the table, squeezing hard in warning. Dante went rigid beside me, but he didn't move, didn't turn to look at Marco's approach. Instead, his fingers interlaced with mine in a grip so tight it was almost painful. "Sir," Marco said, stopping at our table. "Compliments of the chef." His right hand remained inside his jacket. I knocked my water glass over, sending ice and liquid cascading into Dante's lap. He jerked back instinctively as I fumbled with my napkin. "I'm so sorry," I gasped, loud enough to draw attention. "Let me help you with that." The commotion was enough. Dante's bodyguards materialized beside us, one of them casually gripping Marco's wrist and pulling it from his pocket. Something metallic clattered to the floor. A syringe, I realized with horror. Not a gun, but perhaps something deadlier. What happened next blurred into chaos. Marco was dragged away through a side door, his face drained of color. Dante stood, seemingly unconcerned about his wet pants, and placed a hand on the small of my back. "We're leaving," he said, his voice calm but brooking no argument. "You're coming with me." "What?" "No, I can't. I have a shift," I stammered, panic rising in my chest. His expression softened fractionally. Eleanor, the man who just tried to kill me saw your face. He heard you warn me. How long do you think you'll last once his employers find out? The blood drained from my face as the implications set in. I'd acted on instinct, never considering the consequences. By saving Dante Russo, I had potentially signed my own death warrant. My apartment, my things, will be taken care of. His hand on my back guided me toward the exit. Right now, we need to move. Outside, a sleek black car idled at the curb, its engine a low purr in the autumn night. One of the bodyguards opened the rear door, and Dante ushered me inside before sliding in beside me. The interior smelled of expensive leather and his cologne, something woody and dark that made my head swim. As the car pulled away from the curb, I stared back at La Stella's illuminated entrance, watching my normal life recede into the distance. 6 hours into a Tuesday night shift, and I had somehow stumbled from invisibility into the orbit of the most dangerous man in East Harbor. Dante's hand found mine in the darkness of the back seat. "You saved my life," he said quietly. "Why?" I turned to look at him, this beautiful, lethal stranger who now controlled my fate. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "It just felt wrong. The way he looked at you." He studied me for a long moment, his thumb tracing small circles on the inside of my wrist. My pulse jumped beneath his touch. "Most people in this city would celebrate my death, Eleanor. Do you know who I am? What I do?" "I've heard things," I whispered. "And yet you warned me." His free hand came up to brush a strand of hair from my face, the gesture so gentle it made my breath catch. "I think fate has delivered you to me for a reason." As the car accelerated into the night, carrying me away from everything familiar, I couldn't help but wonder if I had escaped one danger, only to fall into something far more consuming. In Dante Russo's world, salvation and captivity might prove to be the same thing. Dawn broke through unfamiliar curtains, casting ribbons of pale gold across a bed that wasn't mine. I blinked awake slowly, disoriented by the silken sheets and the vast expanse of mattress surrounding me. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was or how I'd gotten there. Then the previous night came rushing back. Marco's cold eyes, the syringe clattering to the floor, Dante Russo's hand on my back guiding me to his car. I sat up, clutching the sheets to my chest, though I was still fully dressed in yesterday's uniform, minus my shoes and apron. The bedroom around me was spacious but surprisingly understated. Cream walls, dark wooden furniture, and large windows overlooking a slice of ocean in the distance. No personal photographs, no clutter. It could have been a high-end hotel suite, but for the faint scent of sandalwood and citrus that seemed embedded in the pillowcase, Dante's scent. A soft knock at the door made me jump. "Miss Eleanor?" A woman's voice, accented and professional. "Mr. Russo asked me to check if you're awake." "May I come in?" "Yes," I called, my own voice sounding foreign to my ears. The door opened to reveal a petite woman with steel-gray hair pulled into a tight bun. She wore a simple black dress with a white collar, like a modern interpretation of a housekeeper's uniform. Her eyes swept over me with practiced efficiency. "I am Mrs. Vega," she said, her tone clipped but not unkind. "Mr. Russo has arranged clothing for you. When you're ready, breakfast is served on the terrace. The bathroom is through there." She gestured to a door I hadn't noticed. "You'll find everything you need." Before I could form a response, she crossed to a closet and pulled out a garment bag, laying it carefully across the foot of the bed. "Mr. Russo will join you in 1 hour. Please make yourself comfortable until then." With that, she exited, leaving me alone again with the garment bag and 1,000 questions. The bathroom was larger than my entire apartment, all marble and glass with a shower big enough for 4 people. I stood under the hot spray for long minutes, trying to make sense of my new reality. By warning Dante, I had saved him from whatever Marco had planned, but I had also entangled myself in something dangerous and unknown. There would be consequences. There were always consequences. Inside the garment bag, I found a simple but elegant sundress in pale blue, along with underwear that still had price tags attached. My cheeks burned when I saw the designer label and the 4-digit price. The tags on the underwear told a similar story. Who had selected these items? Dante himself? The thought made my stomach flutter with an emotion I couldn't identify. I dressed quickly, surprised by how perfectly everything fit. The mirror reflected a stranger, a young woman in expensive clothes with freshly washed hair and wide, uncertain eyes. I looked both more and less like myself. Following Mrs. Vega's directions, I made my way through the house, a sprawling oceanfront property with floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist decor. Armed men stood at various points, their presence both reassuring and terrifying. They nodded respectfully as I passed, but their eyes tracked my movements with calculated vigilance. The terrace overlooked a private beach, the morning sun glinting off the water. A table had been set with an array of breakfast foods, fresh fruit, pastries, a silver carafe of what smelled like coffee. I hesitated at the threshold, suddenly overwhelmed by the strangeness of it all. "You look lovely in that color." I turned to find Dante watching me from the doorway. He'd changed since last night, now dressed in tailored dark jeans and a light gray button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing strong forearms and the edge of what looked like a tattoo disappearing beneath the fabric. Despite the casual attire, he radiated authority. A predator at rest, but no less dangerous. "Thank you for the clothes," I said, crossing my arms over my chest self-consciously. "And for the room, but I need to know what's happening. Why am I here? When can I go home?" His expression softened as he moved toward me. "You're afraid. That's understandable." He pulled out a chair at the table and gestured for me to sit. "Please eat something. We have much to discuss." I sat cautiously, watching as he took the seat across from me, and poured coffee into 2 porcelain cups. His movements were precise, controlled. The sunlight caught the angles of his face, illuminating features that seemed carved from marble. "Your apartment has been searched," he said without preamble, sliding a cup toward me. "My men found surveillance equipment installed in the walls. Someone has been watching you for weeks, possibly months." The coffee cup rattled against the saucer as I set it down. "What? Why would anyone—" "To get to me." He leaned forward, those dark eyes intent on mine. "Last night wasn't random, Eleanor. Marco was sent by my enemies, who somehow knew I would be at La Stella. They placed him there months ago, waiting for an opportunity. But I don't understand. What do I have to do with any of this?" Dante's jaw tightened. "That's what I've been trying to determine. The fact that they were watching you suggests they believed you could be useful to them in some way?" A chill ran through me despite the morning warmth. "I've never met you before last night. I don't know anything about your business or your enemies." "No," he agreed, studying me over the rim of his cup. "But your father did." The world seemed to tilt beneath me. My father? He was a high school history teacher before he got sick. Among other things, Dante set down his cup with deliberate care. "Vincent Gray worked for me for many years, Eleanor. He was one of my most trusted advisors until his illness forced his retirement." I shook my head, rejecting his words. "That's not possible. My father was a good man. He taught teenagers about the Civil War in ancient Rome. He grew tomatoes in our backyard." "All true," Dante acknowledged. "Vincent compartmentalized his life perfectly. That's what made him so valuable, his ability to move between worlds without contamination. His moral compass remained intact despite the company he kept." Memories flashed through my mind, unexplained late nights when I was a child, hushed phone calls, occasional meetings with stern-faced men who showed my father unusual deference. I had attributed it all to school board politics or teacher union business. How naive I'd been. "What did he do for you?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Dante considered me for a long moment before answering. He managed certain financial arrangements, legitimate investments, properties, charitable foundations. He helped build the legal facade that protects my other interests. My father, the quiet academic I'd admired my whole life, had worked for the mob, had laundered money, or whatever euphemism they used for making criminal enterprises appear legitimate. The knowledge felt like a betrayal, a posthumous rewriting of everything I thought I knew about him. "Vincent never wanted you involved," Dante continued, his voice gentler now. "When he fell ill, he came to me one last time, asking for my word that you would be protected, kept separate from our world, and yet here I am," I said bitterly. "Here you are." He reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine, "Because someone wants to use you against me. Someone who knew about Vincent's connection to my organization and assumed his daughter might make a useful pawn. I pulled my hand away. I'm not a pawn. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. No. A pawn wouldn't have noticed what you noticed last night. A pawn wouldn't have acted so decisively, warning a dangerous stranger about a threat. You're something else entirely, Eleanor. The intensity in his gaze made me look away, out toward the ocean where waves crashed against the private shoreline. I want to go home. That's not possible right now. It isn't safe. So I'm a prisoner? You're under my protection. He stood abruptly, pacing to the terrace railing. Until I eliminate the threat, you'll remain here where I can ensure your safety. And how long will that take? I asked, anxiety crawling up my throat. He turned back to me, sunlight haloing his dark hair. That depends on how quickly we can identify who's behind this. I have people working on it, tracking Marco's communications, investigating who placed him at La Stella. A thought occurred to me then, something so obvious I was ashamed it had taken me this long to ask. The ring. Last night, you had an engagement ring. You're getting married? Something dangerous flashed across his features before his expression smoothed again. That's complicated. Complicated how? Either you're engaged or you're not. He returned to the table, leaning forward with his palms flat against the surface. In my world, Eleanor, marriages are often strategic alliances rather than love matches. The Vasiliev family controls the port operations I need to expand my shipping interests. Their daughter comes with access to those resources. The casual way he spoke of marriage, of a woman, as a business transaction made my skin crawl. So you were going to propose to someone you don't love for business reasons? I was considering it, he corrected. Now those considerations have become more complex. Because of me? The question slipped out before I could stop it. His eyes darkened. Because someone tried to kill me before I could make the proposal. Because that someone might be connected to the Vasiliev family themselves. And yes, because of you. A door opened behind us, and one of Dante's bodyguards, the same hulking man from the restaurant, stepped onto the terrace. Boss, Vasiliev is on the line. Says it's urgent. Dante straightened, all trace of softness vanishing from his demeanor. I'll take it in my office. Have someone bring Miss Gray anything she needs. He turned back to me. We'll continue this discussion later. Please don't leave the house. The grounds are secure, but the security system only extends to the property line. With that, he was gone, leaving me alone with my cooling coffee and the weight of revelations I couldn't process. My father had been a criminal. I was being watched. And now I was essentially a captive in a mobster's beachfront mansion, caught in the crossfire of a power struggle I didn't understand. I spent the morning exploring the parts of the house that weren't obviously off-limits. The library drew me in, wall-to-wall bookshelves filled with an eclectic mix of classics, history, and modern literature. Many of the books showed signs of having been read repeatedly, their spines cracked, pages dog-eared. I wondered if they belonged to Dante, or if this had been someone else's sanctuary before he acquired the property. In a glass-fronted cabinet, a collection of framed photographs caught my eye. Most featured the same dark-haired woman in different stages of life. As a young bride, holding a baby, standing beside a teenage boy who had Dante's eyes. His mother, I realized. The boy must be Dante himself, decades younger but with the same watchful intensity. He was 15 there, a voice said from behind me. I turned to find Mrs. Vega arranging fresh flowers in a vase near the doorway. She nodded toward the photograph I'd been studying. The day before his father was killed. After that, there were no more family pictures. How did his father die? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. Rivals, she said simply. Mr. Russo was forced to take over the family business very young. It shaped him in ways both good and bad. There was something in her tone, a mixture of pride and sadness, that made me wonder about her relationship to the Russo family. You've known him a long time. I raised him after his mother fell into depression. She finished with the flowers and turned to face me fully, which is why I feel I can tell you this. Be careful with his heart, Miss Gray. It may seem impenetrable, but that's only because it's been broken before. Before I could respond to this unexpected warning, the library door opened again, and Dante himself appeared, his expression thunderous. His eyes darted between Mrs. Vega and me. Elena, he said, his voice deceptively calm. "I need a moment with Miss Gray." Mrs. Vega nodded and slipped from the room without another word. As the door closed behind her, Dante stalked toward me, his movements reminding me of a caged panther I'd once seen at the zoo. Power constrained, but barely. "Did you know Marco before last night?" he demanded without preamble. I blinked in surprise. "Only as a co-worker. We were on opposite shifts most of the time." "Did he ever express interest in you? Ask personal questions? Offer to drive you home?" "No, nothing like that. We barely spoke." I set down the photograph I'd been holding. "What's happened?" Dante ran a hand through his hair, disrupting its perfect arrangement. "Marco is dead." Before my men could question him properly, he bit down on a cyanide capsule hidden in his tooth. Professional job. Horror washed through me. Oh my God. He had your address written on a slip of paper in his wallet, along with the words, Gray's daughter. Dante's eyes bored into mine. "I need to know if you're holding anything back, Eleanor. For both our sakes." "I'm not," I insisted, indignation cutting through my shock. "Until last night, I thought my father was just a teacher. I had no idea he worked for you, or that anyone would care who his daughter was." Dante studied me for a long moment, then seemed to come to a decision. He closed the distance between us, his hands coming up to frame my face. The touch was gentle but insistent, forcing me to meet his gaze. "I believe you," he said softly, "but someone wants me to think otherwise. Someone is trying to drive a wedge between us before we've even had a chance to." He trailed off, his thumbs brushing my cheekbones in small, distracting circles. "A chance to what?" I whispered, suddenly aware of how close we were standing, of the warmth radiating from his body. Instead of answering, he leaned down and pressed his lips to mine. The kiss was brief but devastating. A claiming, a promise, a warning all at once. When he pulled away, his eyes had darkened to obsidian. "I've had men watching you for months," he confessed, his hands still cradling my face. "After your father died. Not because I didn't trust you, but because I promised him I would keep you safe. I've seen how hard you work, how you struggle to make ends meet, how you fade into the background, trying not to be noticed." Ooh, my heart pounded against my ribs like a trapped bird. "You've been spying on me?" "Protecting you," he corrected. "Though clearly not well enough. If others managed to bug your apartment without my people noticing." I should have been furious, should have pushed him away. Instead, I found myself swaying toward him, drawn by something I couldn't name. "What happens now?" His expression hardened with determination. "Now, I keep you closer than ever. No one touches what's mine, Eleanor, and whether you've realized it yet or not, you became mine the moment you whispered in my ear." For 3 days, I existed in a strange limbo within Dante's fortress by the sea. By unspoken agreement, we didn't discuss the kiss in the library or his possessive declaration that followed. Instead, a careful dance emerged between us, proximity without intimacy, connection without acknowledgement. Dante worked from home, converting a section of the sprawling mansion into an impromptu command center. Men in suits came and went at all hours, their hushed conversations falling silent whenever I entered a room. I caught fragments nonetheless, names I didn't recognize, locations throughout the city, and once, the chilling phrase, "clean it up completely." On the 4th morning, I stood on the balcony of my bedroom, watching the sunrise paint the ocean in shades of pink and gold. Despite the beauty around me and the undeniable luxury of my temporary prison, restlessness gnawed at me. I needed answers. About my father, about Marco, about the danger that had upended my life. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. "Come in," I called, expecting Mrs. Vega with breakfast. Instead, Dante appeared, looking unusually casual in black track pants and a fitted gray t-shirt that revealed the muscular contours of his arms. A thin sheen of sweat glistened on his forehead, suggesting he'd been exercising. "Good morning," he said, joining me at the balcony railing. "Sleep well?" I nodded, suddenly conscious of my thin nightgown and tangled hair. "Well enough." He smiled, the expression transforming his severe features into something almost boyish. "Liar. You were pacing until after midnight, I could hear you through the floor. Heat crept into my cheeks. His bedroom must be directly below mine. A thought both unsettling and thrilling. I have a lot on my mind. I know. He turned to face the ocean, his profile sharp against the morning light. That's why I'm here. Get dressed. I want to show you something. Curiosity overrode my hesitation. What is it? Your father's legacy. He glanced at me, his expression unreadable. 15 minutes? I agreed, and he left me to prepare. In the massive closet attached to my room, I found more clothing that hadn't been there the day before. Jeans, t-shirts, sweaters, all in my size and in colors I would have chosen myself. The casual items were a welcome change from the dresses and skirts that had comprised my wardrobe so far. Dressed in jeans and a simple blue sweater, I found Dante waiting in the foyer. He'd changed as well, into dark jeans and a black button-down shirt. A leather jacket hung over his arm, and keys dangled from his fingers. No bodyguards today? I asked, noticing the absence of his usual shadows. Something like mischief flickered across his features. Just driver and security in a follow car. Sometimes I need space to breathe. He held up the keys. Besides, I rarely get to drive myself anymore. The garage beneath the house contained a collection of vehicles that would have made a museum curator weep. Vintage sports cars, alongside modern luxury sedans, each more expensive than the last. Dante led me to a sleek black Porsche nestled between two larger SUVs. Your chariot, he said, opening the passenger door with a flourish. The interior smelled of leather and Dante's cologne, enveloping me as I slid into the low seat. He joined me a moment later, starting the engine with a throaty rumble that vibrated through the car's frame. Where are we going? I asked, as we emerged from the underground garage into the bright morning sunlight. Dante navigated the winding coastal road with practiced ease, one hand resting loosely on the steering wheel. Your father owned property in Mount Cedar. Did you know that? I frowned. Mount Cedar was an exclusive enclave in the hills overlooking East Harbor, home to the city's elite. That's impossible. We lived in a rented duplex my whole life. Dad was always careful with money, especially after my mother died. Vincent was careful with appearances, Dante corrected. The modest lifestyle, the rented home, all part of maintaining his separation between worlds, but he was well compensated for his work with me. The implications staggered me. All those years of pinching pennies, taking on extra tutoring jobs to make ends meet, worrying about medical bills during my father's illness. Had it all been an elaborate charade? Why would he live like that if he had money? I asked, my voice tight with confusion and the first stirrings of anger. Dante's eyes remained on the winding road ahead. Protection. For both of you. Wealth attracts attention, and attention was the last thing Vincent wanted for his daughter. We drove in silence after that, climbing higher into the hills until the city spread out below us, a sprawling patchwork of buildings with the harbor gleaming in the distance. Finally, Dante turned down a private road partially hidden by mature oak trees. A wrought iron gate stood open, leading to a circular driveway that curved around a central fountain. The house beyond wasn't what I expected. No ostentatious mansion, but a tasteful Mediterranean-style villa. 2 stories of warm stucco with terracotta roof tiles and climbing bougainvillea framing the entryway. It looked peaceful, welcoming. This is it? I asked as Dante parked in front of the main entrance. He nodded, studying my reaction. Your father purchased it almost 20 years ago after your mother died. He never lived here, but he maintained it. Said it would be yours when the time was right. A lump formed in my throat. I don't understand any of this. I know. His hand found mine across the console, squeezing gently. That's why we're here. You need to see who your father really was. All of him. Not just the parts he showed you. Inside, the villa was filled with light from tall windows and glass doors that opened onto terraced gardens. The furnishings were simple, but elegant, clearly chosen with care. What struck me most, however, were the bookshelves, entire walls lined with volumes, many of which I recognized from my father's collection in our modest home. He brought books here regularly, Dante explained, watching me run my fingers over the familiar spines. Added to the library whenever he acquired something new. It was his way of making this place ready for you, I think. In the study, a large desk dominated the space, its surface bare except for a single wooden box. Dante crossed to it, lifting the lid to reveal a leather-bound journal and a sealed envelope with my name written in my father's neat script. "I found these after he died," Dante said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "Vincent asked me to bring you here when you were ready to learn the truth. I thought I'd have more time to prepare you." With trembling hands, I took the letter, breaking the seal to reveal several pages of handwritten text. My father's words leapt from the page in a voice so familiar it made my chest ache. "My dearest Ellie, if you're reading this, then I am gone. And Dante has judged it necessary for you to know the truth I've kept from you all these years. I hope you can forgive me for the secrets and the lies. Everything I did, every choice I made, was to protect you and give you the chance at a life uncomplicated by the world I inhabited. Yes, I taught history to teenagers. Yes, I grew tomatoes. But I also managed investments and properties for Dante Russo and his organization. I laundered money, created paper trails, established legitimate businesses to conceal illegitimate earnings. I did this knowingly, with open eyes. It began before you were born, when your mother and I were young and desperate. Medical school had left us drowning in debt, and then came her diagnosis: cancer, aggressive and expensive to treat. Dante's father offered me a way out, money for her treatments in exchange for my financial expertise. By the time I realized the full extent of what I was involved in, I was in too deep to extricate myself. After your mother died, I considered running, taking you far away from East Harbor and the Russo family. But Dante had just lost his own father, and in our shared grief, I saw something in him worth believing in. A young man thrust into power who needed guidance to wield it with some measure of restraint and wisdom. Over the years, I like to think I helped steer him toward choices that minimized bloodshed and harm, that built something with at least a veneer of legitimacy. I cannot claim clean hands, but I can say I tried to be a moderating influence. The villa you now stand in represents my hope for your future. A fresh start, free from financial worry, in a place no one associates with Vincent Gray, high school teacher. The accounts linked to this property contain enough money to support you comfortably for many years, or to fund whatever dreams you wish to pursue far from East Harbor. I ask only one thing: be careful with Dante Russo. He is both better and worse than his reputation suggests, capable of terrible violence, but also of surprising tenderness. He has honored his promise to keep you separate from his world while I lived. If you are reading this now, circumstances have forced his hand. Trust your instincts, my brave girl. They have always been your greatest strength. All my love, Dad. I lowered the letter, tears blurring my vision. Dante stood by the window, his back to me, giving me the privacy to absorb my father's words. "He thought he was protecting me," I said finally, my voice breaking on the last word. Dante turned, his expression somber. He was. Vincent was the closest thing to a father I had after my own was killed. His only condition for continuing to work with me was your safety and separation from our world. And now that separation is gone. I folded the letter carefully, sliding it back into its envelope. "What happens to me now, Dante?" He crossed the room slowly, his movements measured as if approaching a frightened animal. "That depends on what you want, Eleanor. This house is yours. The accounts your father established are considerable, enough for you to disappear, start fresh somewhere far from East Harbor and the complications of my life." "Is that what you want me to do?" I asked, searching his face for some hint of his thoughts. His jaw tightened. "What I want?" He stopped, seeming to wrestle with himself. "What I want doesn't matter. Your father entrusted your safety to me, and I've already failed by allowing others to target you. The smartest thing would be for you to take the money and go. But that's not what you're going to suggest." A rueful smile touched his lips. "No. Because I'm selfish, Eleanor. Because in less than a week, you've become important to me." The admission hung between us, weighted with unspoken implications. I thought of Mrs. Vega's warning about his heart, of my father's letter describing him as capable of both violence and tenderness. "The Vasiliev family," I said. "The engagement. Is that still happening?" Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. No, that arrangement is no longer viable. Marco's attempt on my life came hours before a scheduled meeting with Viktor Vasilyev. The timing wasn't coincidental. So they tried to kill you? Or make it appear that way to provoke a war between our organizations? Dante moved closer, until I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Either way, the result is the same. The alliance is dead, and tensions are escalating. East Harbor is about to become very dangerous. I thought of my small apartment, my job at La Stella, the quiet life I'd built for myself. All of it seemed like it belonged to someone else now. A simpler version of Eleanor Gray, who hadn't yet learned about her father's double life or kissed a Mafia boss in his library. I should go, I said, though the words felt hollow. Take the money. Start over somewhere else. Yes, Dante agreed. Even as his hand came up to cup my cheek, you should. But neither of us moved. His thumb traced the curve of my lower lip, and I leaned into his touch like a flower seeking sunlight. Tell me to let you go, he murmured, his voice rough with restraint. Tell me to put you on a plane to anywhere but here, and I will. The answer that rose to my lips surprised even me. No. His eyes darkened. Eleanor, I'm tired of being protected from the truth, I interrupted. Tired of others deciding what I should know, where I should be, who I should be. My father did it for years, and now you're trying to do the same. Dante's expression changed, a flicker of admiration breaking through his careful control. And what truth do you want, Eleanor? That I've killed men who threatened my business? That I've built my fortune on activities your father helped conceal? That I want you in ways that would terrify you if you understood them fully? His bluntness should have repelled me. Instead, it drew me closer, like a moth to a dangerous flame. I want all of it, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. No more secrets, no more protection. If I'm going to make a real choice, I need to know what I'm choosing. For a long moment, he simply looked at me, as if seeing me for the first time. Then he took my hand and led me through the villa to a secluded terrace overlooking the gardens below. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks hazy in the morning light. We sat at a stone table, and Dante removed his jacket, draping it over the back of his chair with deliberate care. When he spoke again, his voice had taken on a detached quality, as if reciting facts from a textbook. The Russo family has controlled various aspects of East Harbor's underworld for 3 generations. My grandfather started with protection rackets and gambling. My father expanded into drug trafficking and weapons. When I took over at 15, we were at war with 3 rival families. He paused, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm on the table. I was angry, reckless. In my first year, I doubled our territory, but lost 17 men, including 2 cousins. Vincent, your father, was the one who suggested a different approach. Legitimacy, he called it. A way to launder not just our money, but our reputation. So you became a businessman, I said, remembering the newspapers that occasionally featured Dante's name in connection with real estate developments or charity galas. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I became many things: a property developer, a shipping magnate, a silent partner in dozens of legitimate enterprises across the city. But underneath it all, he spread his hands, the gesture encompassing everything he couldn't put into words. You're still a criminal, I finished for him. Yes. No denial, no justification, just simple acknowledgement. The legitimate businesses thrive, but they're built on a foundation of other activities: gambling, protection, smuggling, selective enforcement of my will. I've minimized the violence, eliminated our involvement in prostitution and human trafficking, but I won't pretend my hands are clean. I thought of my father's letter, his claim to have been a moderating influence. Perhaps it was true. This version of Dante Russo seemed calculated, controlled. A far cry from the impulsive teenager who'd waged bloody war after his father's death. And the Vasilyev family? I asked. Where do they fit into this picture? Dante's expression darkened. Viktor Vasilyev controls the Port Authority through a network of corrupted officials. For years, we've maintained an uneasy truce. He allows my shipments through in exchange for a percentage and non-interference in his other operations. His daughter, Natalia, was to be the seal on a more permanent arrangement. An arranged marriage, I said, unable to keep the distaste from my voice. A business transaction, he corrected. Natalia understood the terms. She's her father's daughter in every sense, ambitious, calculating, willing to do whatever necessary to secure her family's position. Jealousy, unexpected and unwelcome, coiled in my stomach at the thought of this unknown woman who had nearly been Dante's fiancée. Do you care for her? The question seemed to surprise him. I respect her intelligence and ambition. In another life, we might have made an effective partnership. He leaned forward, his gaze intense. But there was never any question of feelings between us, Eleanor. In my world, marriage has little to do with love. Then what does it have to do with? I asked, genuinely curious. Power? Security? Continuation of bloodlines? His mouth quirked in a humorless smile. All the medieval concerns of feudal lords, dressed in modern clothing. I looked out at the peaceful garden, trying to reconcile this frank discussion of criminal empires and arranged marriages with the man sitting across from me, the man who had kissed me with such restrained passion, who had offered me an escape from his world even as everything in his posture suggested he wanted me to stay. And now? I asked, returning my gaze to him. What happens now that the Vasiliev alliance has collapsed? Dante's expression became grim. War, most likely. If Victor was behind the attempt on my life, or even if he just believes I suspect him of it, he'll move to protect his interests. Territory will be contested. People will die. People like me? The question slipped out before I could consider its implications. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. No, never you. I would burn East Harbor to the ground before I let harm come to you, Eleanor. The fervor in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, it sent a thrill of something like power through my veins. This dangerous man, who controlled an empire built on violence and fear, looked at me as if I were something precious. Because of my father? I asked, needing to understand. Because you promised him you'd protect me? Dante's thumb traced slow circles on the inside of my wrist, his eyes never leaving mine. At first, yes. But now? He hesitated, seeming to search for words that eluded him. Now it's something else entirely. Before I could press him on what he meant, his phone vibrated on the table between us. He glanced at the screen, his expression hardening instantly. We need to go, he said, rising from his chair. That was my security team. There's been an incident at the house. Fear clutched at my throat. What kind of incident? A warning. He held out his hand to me. I'll explain in the car. We're exposed here. The drive back to Dante's seaside mansion was tense, the Porsche eating up the coastal road at speeds that should have terrified me. Dante drove with machine-like precision, one hand on the wheel, the other holding his phone to his ear as he barked orders to whoever was on the other end. I caught fragments. Full lockdown. Sweep the perimeter. Move them to the safe house. Each phrase ratcheting up my anxiety until I felt I might shatter from the tension. When he finally ended the call, I turned to him. Tell me what's happening. Someone left a package at the front gate, he said, his voice controlled but with an undercurrent of rage. A box containing Marco's severed fingers and a note. Bile rose in my throat. Oh, God. What did the note say? Dante's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. The daughter pays for the father's debts. It was addressed to you, Eleanor. The world seemed to tilt sideways. My father's debts? What could that possibly mean? Vincent Gray had been many things. A teacher, a money launderer for the mob, but all evidence suggested he'd been loyal to Dante until the end. I don't understand, I whispered. My father served you faithfully. You said so yourself. He did. Dante's jaw was tight, a muscle jumping beneath his skin. Which means either someone believes otherwise, or they're using your connection to him as a pretext to get to me. We rounded a curve, and Dante's beachfront property came into view. Even from a distance, I could see the increased security, armed men patrolling the perimeter, vehicles blocking the main gate. What now? I asked as we approached. Now I keep you safe while I find whoever sent that message and make them regret the day they were born. The cold certainty in his voice sent a shiver down my spine. This was the Dante Russo that East Harbor feared, the ruthless enforcer beneath the businessman's polished exterior. He pulled the car into a side entrance I hadn't noticed before, a narrow drive that led to a concealed garage separate from the main house. Inside, Mrs. Vega waited, her normally calm demeanor replaced by grim efficiency. "Everything is prepared," she told Dante as we exited the car. "The helicopter will be ready in 20 minutes. My heart skipped. "Helicopter?" Dante's hand settled on the small of my back, guiding me toward an elevator hidden in the garage wall. "You're going to my property in the mountains. It's more secure, more isolated. Elena will accompany you." "And you?" I asked, already knowing the answer from the hard set of his features. "I'm staying to deal with this." The elevator doors opened, and he ushered me inside, following with Mrs. Vega. "I can't protect you properly if I'm looking over my shoulder, wondering where the next attack will come from." Panic flared in my chest. "You're sending me away? After everything you just told me about wanting me to stay?" The elevator ascended rapidly, depositing us in what appeared to be a secure room filled with monitors showing different parts of the property. 2 men in tactical gear stood at attention, nodding respectfully to Dante before exiting through a heavy metal door. "I'm sending you somewhere safe while I eliminate the threat," Dante corrected, his tone gentler now that we were alone except for Mrs. Vega, who busied herself at a computer terminal. "It's temporary, Eleanor. A few days, a week at most. And if something happens to you while I'm gone?" The possibility opened a void inside me that I wasn't prepared to examine too closely. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, at my concern. "I've survived worse than Viktor Vasiliev's tantrums. I'll find you when it's done." Mrs. Vega approached, holding a small duffel bag. "I've packed essentials for Miss Gray. The helicopter will land on the north pad in 12 minutes. Dante nodded. "Thank you, Elena. Give us a moment." With a knowing look between us, Mrs. Vega retreated to the far side of the room, providing an illusion of privacy. Dante took my hands in his thumbs brushing over my knuckles in a gesture that was becoming familiar. "I need you to trust me," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Everything I'm doing is to protect you." "I know," I admitted. And I did know somehow, despite the madness of the past week. Despite all the reasons I should run far and fast from this man, and the danger that surrounded him. "But I'm afraid for you." A smile touched his lips, transforming his face. "Are you worried about me, Eleanor Gray?" "Someone has to be," I countered. "You're about to start a mob war, not start." His expression sobered. "Finish, decisively and permanently." He released one of my hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small object that he pressed into my palm. "Take this. Keep it with you at all times." I looked down to find a delicate gold locket on a fine chain. "What is this?" "It belonged to my mother." His fingers closed mine around it. "Inside is a tracking device. If you're in danger, if you need me for any reason, press the clasp 3 times quickly. I'll come for you, no matter where you are." The gift stunned me, not just the value of it, but the meaning behind it. Dante Russo, who ruled his empire with calculated control, was giving me direct access to him, a way to summon him at will. "Dante, I can't. Please." The words seemed to cost him something, this man unaccustomed to asking, rather than commanding. "Wear it for me." How could I refuse? I nodded, and he took the locket from my hand, moving behind me to fasten it around my neck. His fingers brushed against my skin, sending electricity racing down my spine. When he turned me to face him again, his expression had changed, something fierce and possessive darkening his features. Without warning, he pulled me against him, one hand tangling in my hair as his mouth found mine. Unlike our first kiss, there was nothing restrained about this one. Dante kissed me as if memorizing me, as if I might disappear if he didn't hold on tight enough. His lips moved against mine with a hunger that ignited something primal within me. I responded with equal fervor, my hands gripping the front of his shirt as if it were an anchor in a storm. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. "Come back to me," I whispered, surprising myself with the rawness in my voice. His eyes, dark and intense, locked on mine. "Always." The helicopter ride was a blur of anxiety and conflicting emotions. Mrs. Vega, Elena, as she insisted I call her now, sat beside me in the sleek black aircraft, her weathered hand occasionally patting mine when the turbulence grew rough. Below us, East Harbor receded, its sprawling streets and glittering harbor giving way to dense forest and rugged mountains. The property, when we arrived, was nothing like I had imagined. No mansion perched on a mountainside, but rather a collection of modern cabins, nestled among towering pines, nearly invisible from the air. The helicopter landed in a small clearing, and Elena led me to the largest structure, a glass and cedar building that seemed to grow organically from the forest floor. This was Mr. Russo's mother's retreat, she explained, as we entered a spacious living area dominated by a stone fireplace and floor-to-ceiling windows. He rebuilt it after her death, but rarely comes here himself. Too many memories, I think. I moved to one of the windows, gazing out at the wilderness that surrounded us. We were miles from anywhere, from anyone. Safe, perhaps, but also isolated from whatever was happening back in East Harbor, from Dante. "Will you tell me about her?" I asked, turning back to Elena. Dante's mother? A sad smile crossed the older woman's face. Sophia was a force of nature, brilliant, beautiful, with a will of iron beneath her gentle exterior. She was never meant for the life she found herself in, but she adapted for love. Elena moved to start a fire in the massive hearth. When Antonio, Dante's father, was killed, something in her broke. She retreated here, leaving Dante to manage both the family business and his own grief. "That's why he had to grow up so quickly," I murmured, fingering the locket around my neck. Dante's mother's locket, now entrusted to me. "Yes." Elena straightened, dusting her hands on her skirt. "I did what I could for him, but a boy needs his mother." By the time Sophia realized what her absence had cost him, it was too late. The boy was gone, replaced by a man who had built walls around his heart that even she couldn't breach. I thought of Dante as I'd last seen him, fierce, protective, his eyes blazing with emotions he couldn't or wouldn't name. "Those walls are still there, yes." Elena's gaze was knowing, "but perhaps not for you." The days passed in a strange, suspended state. The cabin was comfortable, luxuriously appointed with everything we might need. Elena proved to be an excellent cook, preparing elaborate Italian meals that she claimed were Dante's childhood favorites. We took walks in the surrounding forest, careful never to stray too far from the property's perimeter, which was monitored by security systems and occasional patrols by Dante's men. Communication with the outside world was limited to a secure satellite phone that Elena used each evening to receive updates. She never shared the details with me, responding to my anxious questions with reassurances that Mr. Russo is handling the situation or everything is proceeding according to plan. On the 6th night, I sat on the deck outside my bedroom, wrapped in a blanket against the mountain chill. Stars blanketed the sky above, more than I'd ever seen in the light-polluted city. The locket felt warm against my skin, a constant reminder of the man who had turned my world upside down in the span of a week. Was he safe? Was he hurt? Was he killing people in the name of protecting me? The questions circled endlessly, keeping sleep at bay. A twig snapped in the darkness beyond the deck, and I froze. The security perimeter should prevent anyone from approaching undetected. But still, my heart hammered against my ribs. I reached for the locket, ready to press the clasp 3 times as instructed. "Don't be afraid," a familiar voice called softly from the shadows. "It's me." Dante emerged from the tree line, a dark figure moving with predatory grace despite obvious exhaustion. He climbed the stairs to the deck, and the security lights illuminated him fully, revealing a cut above his eyebrow and bruising along his jaw. I was on my feet instantly, the blanket falling forgotten to the deck. "You're hurt." A tired smile curved his lips. "You should see the other guy." Before I could respond, he had crossed the distance between us and pulled me into his arms, burying his face in my hair. I felt him inhale deeply, as if my scent were oxygen after too long underwater. His body was solid and warm against mine, real and alive and here. "Is it over?" I asked, my voice muffled against his chest. His arms tightened around me. Yes, it's over. Later, sitting before the fire in the main cabin, Dante told me what had happened in East Harbor during my absence. Elena had tactfully retired to her own quarters, leaving us alone with a bottle of wine and the crackle of burning logs. Viktor Vasilyev was behind Marco's attempt at La Stella, Dante said, his voice flat as he recounted the events. But not in the way I initially thought. It wasn't an assassination attempt. It was a test. A test? I curled my legs beneath me on the couch, watching his profile in the firelight. The syringe contained a compound that would have incapacitated me, not killed me. I would have been taken somewhere, questioned. His jaw tightened. Victor wanted to know what your father told me before he died. A chill ran through me. Told you about what? Dante took a swallow of wine before answering. 5 years ago, your father discovered something while reviewing our shipping manifests. Discrepancies that suggested someone within my organization was working with the Vasilyevs to smuggle goods through our supply chain without my knowledge or approval. And my father reported this to you? He did. We identified the traitor, one of my cousins as it turned out. The man was dealt with, but not before he had given Victor access to certain sensitive information, bank accounts, safe house locations, names of politicians in my pocket. I struggled to reconcile this world of betrayal and violence with the quiet man who had raised me. So Victor thought my father knew something else? Something he might have told you before he died? Dante nodded, his expression grim. Your father kept meticulous records. Victor believed he had evidence of the Vasilyev family's involvement in human trafficking, specifically, young women brought in through the port and distributed to wealthy clients across the country. Horror washed through me. Did he? Have evidence, I mean? If he did, he never shared it with me. Dante set down his wine glass and turned to face me fully. But Victor couldn't be certain of that. When your father fell ill, Victor had his apartment watched, hoping to recover any evidence before it reached me. After Vincent died, that surveillance extended to you. They thought my father might have left me information without my knowing it. The pieces began falling into place. The bugs in my apartment, Marco's infiltration at La Stella, the warning about my father's debts, the note with Marco's fingers. That was from Victor? Dante's expression darkened. Yes. A threat and a demand. He wanted whatever information your father might have left behind, and he was willing to use you to get it. But there's nothing, I protested. The only thing my father left me was the villa, and the letter explaining his connection to you. I know that now. Dante reached for my hand, his thumb tracing familiar patterns on my skin. But Victor was convinced otherwise. He believed your father had hidden evidence of his crimes somewhere only his daughter might find it. A thought occurred to me then, something so obvious I was amazed I hadn't considered it earlier. The journal, I said suddenly. In the wooden box at the villa. I never opened it. Dante went still. What journal? There was a leather journal with my letter. I was so overwhelmed by everything else, I didn't even think to look at it. Without another word, Dante rose and retrieved a satellite phone from his jacket pocket. He made a brief call, instructing someone to retrieve the box from my father's villa and bring it to the mountain retreat immediately. If your father did leave evidence, he said after ending the call, it changes everything. Viktor Vasilyev is currently contained. But with proof of human trafficking, I could destroy him completely, legally, through channels that would leave my own operations untouched. The casual way he discussed ruining a man's life, deservedly perhaps, if the trafficking allegations were true, reminded me of who and what Dante Russo really was. For days I had romanticized him, focusing on his protection, his intensity, the connection growing between us. But he remained a man who operated outside the law, who used violence as a tool, who spoke of containing rivals as if they were volatile chemicals rather than human beings. What does contained mean? I asked quietly. Dante's eyes met mine, unflinching. It means Viktor Vasilyev is being held in a secure location until I determine his fate. His daughter has fled the country. Their organization is in disarray, their assets frozen or seized. You didn't kill him. Not yet. His honesty was brutal, but somehow reassuring. He wouldn't lie to me, even when the truth was ugly. That depends on what we find in your father's journal, and on what you can live with, Eleanor. The last part caught me by surprise. What I can live with? What does that mean? Dante moved closer on the couch, his eyes never leaving mine. It means I find myself considering your conscience in my decisions. It means I want you in my life, not as someone to protect from a distance, but as someone beside me. It means I'm offering you a choice. My heart pounded against my ribs. What choice? Stay with me, he said simply. Be with me, knowing exactly who and what I am. Or take your inheritance, your father's villa, and build a life far away from East Harbor and the complications of my world. The journal arrived by courier the following morning. A leather-bound volume filled with my father's neat handwriting, detailing dates, locations, and names connected to the Vasiliev family's trafficking operation. With it was a USB drive containing photographs, financial records, and enough evidence to bring down not just Victor, but several high-ranking politicians and businessmen who had used his services. Dante made more calls, set more plans in motion. The evidence would go to specific federal agents my father had identified as uncorrupted. Viktor Vasiliev would face justice through legal channels, his empire dismantled systematically. Your father was more cunning than I gave him credit for, Dante said, as we stood on the cabin's deck, watching the courier's helicopter disappear into the distance. He built this case for years, waiting for the right moment. He was a history teacher, I said, a sad smile touching my lips. He always said the most effective revolutions are the ones that appear to come from within the system. Dante's arm slipped around my waist, pulling me against his side. And now I need your answer, Eleanor. Stay or go, with me or without me. I turned in his arms to face him, studying the face that had become so dear to me in such a short time. The sharp angles softened now by something that looked suspiciously like vulnerability. Dante Russo, feared Mafia boss, waiting for my decision as if his life depended on it. I should go, I said honestly. Any sane person would take the money and run as far from East Harbor as possible. His expression didn't change, but I felt the slight tensing of his body. And yet, I reached up to touch the locket around my neck, his mother's locket, his trust, his heart, and yet I find I can't imagine a life where I don't hear you say my name like it's something precious, where I don't feel your hands on my skin, where I don't get to discover all the parts of you that the world never sees. Hope dawned in his eyes, cautious but unmistakable. You'll stay? I'll stay, I confirmed, rising on tiptoes to brush my lips against his. Not because you need me, or because I need your protection, but because whatever this is between us, this impossible, unexpected thing, I want to see where it leads. His smile was like sunrise after the longest night. I should warn you, he murmured against my lips. I'm possessive, demanding, and unaccustomed to compromise. I laughed softly. And I'm stubborn, independent, and no longer interested in being invisible. Good. His arms tightened around me, lifting me until my feet left the ground. Because I want everyone to see exactly who stands beside me. Eleanor Gray, the waitress who saved a monster and decided to keep him. Against all odds, against all reason, I had found my place, not in the quiet, careful life I had built, but in the arms of a dangerous man who looked at me as if I were his salvation. Whatever came next, whatever challenges we would face them together. Keep still, I had whispered to him that first night. A warning meant to save his life. Now, held safely in his embrace, with the mountains surrounding us and the future unfolding before us, I finally understood. Sometimes the most dangerous choices lead to the most unexpected happiness.